So this is what getting cancelled in the 1920s looks like if it was made into a film. Wicked Little Letters takes place in the 1920s in a small English town called Littlehampton. It follows the story of Edith Swan, a conservative, religious lady who is being harassed via multiple letters being sent to a house that are full of profanities. She suspects that her neighbour Rose Gooding is the one behind the letters. The story then follows what happens as a consequence of these letters and who's really behind them. This film is being kind of promoted and marketed as a comedy film. However, I think that it works better as almost a drama because the subject matter in which it touches on is very serious, such as misogyny and abuse. And I think when the film delves into the social commentary with regards to that, as well as the modern parallels to our life these days with social media, whether it be cancellation or trolling or perceptions of people and the effects that those perceptions has on their lives, I think that's where the film is strongest. When it tries to go into comedy, and when it does go into comedy, it works, but it's not hilarious, although it is being billed by some critics as being very hilarious. And I think that the writing's good, but it's not great in terms of comedy at least. And I think that when it does lead into the serious subject matter, I think that's when the film kind of has more of an identity and is more interesting, at least to me. Now, Wicked Little Letters was written by Johnny Sweet, who's done Gap Year Together and Chickens. Chickens specifically actually acted alongside Joe Thomas and Simon Bird from The Inbetweeners. He collaborated with historian Emily Cochrane, who wrote the books Cheek by Jowl, A History of Neighbours, and Penning Poison, A History of Anonymous Letters. Now, the cinematography is done by a Hollywood giant, really. You've probably not heard of him because his style isn't very stylistic. It's very functional, and I think that means that he probably gets a lot of good work. So, Ben Davies has done Banshees of Inisherin, Eternals, The Kingsman, 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, and a lot more Marvel films. So, he's a real veteran, and like I've said in previous reviews, his cinematography is very functional. It didn't get in the way in the film. It was very much all tripod shots on the ground, naturalistic lighting. It seems like a lot of the outdoor kind of shots that was in the film and sequences were filmed with natural daylight and maybe augmented with studio lighting. But this is very much not a studio-based film. It's filmed on location. When I laughed in the film, it was a ha ha ha, or a blow through the nose kind of. It wasn't like rolling around in stitches. The plot wasn't subservient to the comedy. The comedy kind of ran throughout the story because essentially it's a story about someone sending letters full of swear words. But in my opinion, that only has so much mileage because it's characters at the end of the day that are funny in the situations that they're in. And a lot of the time, the situations that they're in, if you remove the kind of comedy from the script, it's quite serious. It deals with misogyny within the workplace. It deals with the consequences of basically being framed for a crime and the implications that has on a mother, what the penal system looks like for women in the 1920s, and abuse and how abuse can lead people to become abusive. And I think that made the film more interesting. But the fact that it's been billed as a comedy, I think is somewhat misleading, though I do understand it, as you want to get bums in seats, right? And when you've got like a comedy titan like Olivia Colman, who's now won an Oscar, then it makes sense to bill it as a comedy. Now, I think this film came out now because of the parallels that you could draw from the case, the true crime that happens in it, and the modern phenomenon of cancellation and trolling that happens on the internet. Whilst it's not really explored like super in depth, it is there, and I think that was probably part of the reason of why it was made today as opposed to, say, 10 years ago. Now, the thing that holds up this film is the acting. The actors all in it, the whole cast, were superb. Olivia Colman, in any other actor's hands, would have made Edith Swan a very, very dislikable character. However, she gave Edith Swan such humanity, and you almost felt sorry for her when it's revealed as to why she's acting the way she is and what she's done within the story. There's a fantastic scene where Rafe Spall who plays her abusive father, forces her to read out some scripture from the Bible, and the whole kind of tone of the film changes in that moment, and the whole pacing of the film in that scene slows down, and it is really, really terrifying the way that Rafe Spall kind of conducts himself in this quiet anger, and it's quite upsetting to watch. And watching those two actors, Olivia Colman and Rafe Spall, work together in that scene was magic, and it really did kind of get you on side for Edith Swan's character at that point. Now, had that been done by any other actor that couldn't communicate like Olivia Colman did, like the fear and the need to be loved all in her face and eyes, if that wasn't done properly, then I think your sympathy for that character would have been massively diminished, and I'm not sure anyone else could have really done that, considering that Olivia Colman is a titan of comedy, but also a very, very accomplished and serious actor at the same time. And there's not many actors that exist in both spaces so well other than Olivia Colman. Now, I can't talk about this film without talking about Jessie Buckley as well. She was fantastic as Rose Gooding. However, I don't think that she really stood out as much as, say, the other characters in the films, as she's a vehicle for the story. But however, she was full of character. To say that she was, an Irish migrant, and it's the 1920s, and they live in a small village, the way that she conducts herself as being loud, brash, sexually liberated, very vocal, that would have obviously rubbed against people, and that's where a lot of the comedy comes from. And I think that seeing the misogyny that's built into people at the time, and her character, and the situations that it causes, it makes you feel like you want to like Rose's character, because she's progressive. She holds the kind of values that we take for granted now. So you've got Rose Gooding, who's the antithesis of Edith Swan's family, and I think that plays very well together in seeing how Edith Swan and Rose Gooding's character kind of negotiates their relationship, makes the film more interesting. I think Anjana Vasan, who plays police officer Gladys Moss, was really, really good. I think that their addition to the story to show that, being a woman back then and wanting to have a career, and the pitfalls and the drawbacks and the misogyny that you're going to deal with, it was frustrating to watch, and she did a really good job of being a character that you root for and you want to succeed, because essentially they're the whistleblower. So I thought she was fantastic, and that was my first time seeing her in a film, and I think she smashed it. With that being said about how good the acting is, I do think that some of the actors, who a lot of them are British comedy talent that you'll have seen in lots of different things, and you can go, oh, I don't notice them, oh, I know that guy's face, but what's he from? I think those actors were probably underutilised. They were like bit parts, essentially, for laughs and to kind of become the connective tissue for the themes that are explored in the film, such as misogyny, but they're not really given any full-blown kind of scenes to own where they can become fully developed characters. I think it's interesting that Ben Davis is the cinematographer for this film, because the kind of small-scale, tight-knit, community-based drama that we have in this film reminds me of Banshees of Inisherin, directed by Martin McDonagh. And I think, whilst that film was funny, Banshees of Inisherin, I do think that it was touted as a dark comedy and a drama as well. And I think this film might have kind of like a marketing identity crisis, in that it's been touted as this comedy when actually it's probably more leaning towards the Banshees of Inisherin darkness. However, I think Banshees of Inisherin kind of used all the characters that they had and explored them as much as they could, where in this film characters were vehicles for comedy, and some of them, that was it, that's all they were. Where the main characters, they definitely did have, stellar acting moments, but also time to explore their characters fully. Saying all this, I do think that the cast carried the film. Now, I love a true story, and I'm really glad that this true story is out on the big screen with all these big actors' names attached to them, because people will learn about the story and may delve into the history of it more. But if you didn't have these actors, I do think that the kind of weaker parts of the story would kind of show. Was it the best film ever? No. Was it something as good as, say, Banshees of Inisherin or other films, almost theatrical, small, tight-knit cast dramas with comedy, like Banshees of Inisherin? No, I don't think it's as good as that. But was it good? Yes. And was it worth seeing? Yes. If you've got time, go see it. Because Wicked Little Letters is pretty wicked.